Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger with LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for September 15th, 2022. On September 7th, 2013, Xi Jinping made an important announcement at a conference in Kazakhstan where he announced a plan for what he called an economic belt along the Silk Road. This was a proposal which had initially been floated by Helga Zepp-LaRouche and the Schiller Institute for a new Silk Road along the old Silk Road as a way of integrating economies and connecting the economies of Eurasia, including extension through to Europe, to Southeast Asia, and on through the Middle East and into Northern Africa. Later, this became known as the Belt and Road Initiative. And by now, more than 130 nations have become affiliated with the Belt and Road Initiative, though not the US, the UK, NATO countries, nor Australia and New Zealand. Instead, this latter group is behind the effort to isolate and contain both Russia and China. And they're now using the conflict in Ukraine to protect a bankrupt global financial system that's run on behalf of the privatized interests that control the City of London and Wall Street. Its leaders are trying to bully the world into accepting their Great Reset and perpetuate their rules-based order by military means if necessary. They're demanding that nations give up their economic sovereignty to what is, in a sense, a global banker's dictatorship, that they accept a supranational institution instead of sovereign nations, that they accept the Green New Deal, which is a Malthusian depopulation plan, and that they join in the containment and isolation of Russia and China. Now, leading the charge for this are the unpopular leaders of governments which have turned against their own people. Let's start at the top, Joe Biden, who's, for most of his presidency, has historically low popularity polls. The unelected Liz Truss, whose tenure as Prime Minister in the United Kingdom may not be for very long. The Schultz coalition in Germany. We now see people coming out mocking the economics minister Habeck and the foreign minister Baerbock, who have insisted that no matter what happens to the German people, they will continue the war against Russia in Ukraine. And we see Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union putting up a brave front as she tells people that the sacrifice of the people in Europe will be for a good cause. Even as she says, don't worry, we're going to protect you. And how is the EU plan to protect the people who are going to be hungry and freezing this winter? By bailing out the electricity companies and the energy companies. So today, another government, which is part of this coalition, has fallen. Sweden's Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson resigned following an election surge of votes which brought a center-right coalition into a majority, a slim majority, but nevertheless a rejection of her government, which, by the way, recently, without a referendum, her government put Sweden into NATO. Now, the Draghi government of Italy collapsed in July for the same reason, unpopularity of the European Union's policy pushed by Draghi. And there are elections coming up in Italy at the end of September, which could lead to a center-right coalition coming to power there. So these Western governments are nothing but fronts for a financialized, privatized project, the Great Reset, in which corporate cartels take over control of governments, not just private banks that determine credit and monetary policy, but also spending policy. This was once called corporatism, which is a fancy word for fascism. A leading figure in this global corporatist movement is now King Charles III of Britain. He's often seen lurking behind Klaus Schwab, who's another frontman for this, Schwab of the World Economic Forum. And their project is now facing what I call the Humpty-Dumpty syndrome. from the old nursery rhyme, the familiar nursery rhyme, which says, all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty-Dumpty together again. Well, King Charles will try. He not so long ago stated that we need a, quote, vast military-style campaign, unquote, to implement the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. Well, the alternative is what Lyndon LaRouche proposed a long time ago. Put their bankrupt system into bankruptcy reorganization and build a new Bretton Woods system, taking the best of the old Bretton Woods system and infusing it with LaRouche's vision of the American system. Today, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization will be meeting in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. The nations involved represent 40% of the world's population, including China, Russia, India, Iran, Pakistan. A major discussion topic at this conference will be a new financial and security architecture, which the Schiller Institute has called for and has had a series of conferences building support for this. This includes investment plans for real physical economic development in infrastructure, transportation, power and electricity production, water management, and trade, with financing outside the dollar system, which is not committed to real physical economic development, but in bailing out the bankrupt financial institutions that are overloaded with unpayable and unsustainable debt. Other institutions involved in this, of course, the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRICS nations, the Organization of Islamic Countries, and the African Union and others, all are looking for development projects financed with the future of those people in mind. In Samarkand, there'll be a reunion of Presidents Putin and Xi Jinping of China. And even Bloomberg News was forced to acknowledge what is underway, although they put it in their usual perverse media formulation. Here's the headline of their article. Xi returns to world stage with Putin to counter US dominance, unquote. And they write that he will appear, quote, alongside Russia's Putin to showcase his vision for a viable alternative, unquote. This is not to counter the United States. It's not to oppose the American people or the American system. It's not anti-American at all. It's anti-globalization. It's an attempt to create a financial system which does not submit to the needs of a bankrupt order for fresh loot. So it's essentially a mobilization against the New World Order, which the Davos globalists are trying to impose. This Humpty-Dumpty order should not be put back together again. Western governments should abandon this idea of the bankrupt unipolar order and join in building a new Bretton Woods of cooperation among sovereign nations, of investment of credit into 25-year and 50-year projects. This is the approach that's always been taken in the United States. If you go back to the early time of the founding fathers, where Alexander Hamilton's vision of a national bank to issue credit for infrastructure, manufacturing, and development enabled the United States to come out from under its debt of the Revolutionary War and become a major power. This was pushed forward by Lincoln's Transcontinental Railroad project, by the infrastructure projects of Franklin Roosevelt to counter the Depression collapse, which was based on a 1920s free market neoliberal system. Whenever the United States applied this idea, which LaRouche resurrected and advanced as the American system of physical economy, whenever we've used that, we've developed, and we've been not just a model for other nations, but a participant in the economic development of other nations, as especially in the rebuilding of Europe and Japan after World War II. Cooperation among sovereign nations, that's the vision the founding fathers had. Instead of a global order run on behalf of and by private financial institutions committed to their own protection and willing to impose on the rest of the world the conditions which we're now seeing on the horizon in Europe as a result of the Green New Deal and the Great Reset. I'll have more on this tomorrow along with your questions. If you have questions, send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And in the meantime, sign and circulate our call for an ad hoc committee for a new Bretton Woods. Let's bring the United States and Europe into this project for a new financial architecture and junk the existing financial architecture before it kills us all.